In this video, I'll talk about all the different types of college loans and grants, and we're starting right now. Hey guys, Elliot here. So this video is for anyone who's thinking of applying for financial aid for higher education, whether it's for you or for someone else. There are numerous options to finance attending a college, trade school, or university, and it can be a bit confusing as to what's available. And if you already have loans and finished your education, well, there's been a lot in the news lately about loan forgiveness. So stick around till the end when I discuss this important topic that could potentially save you thousands of dollars of debt. Okay, let's jump right in, and as always, if you enjoyed this video and found it useful, please do consider subscribing to this channel, and of course, don't forget to smash that like button. So to start off at the very beginning, there are essentially two ways you can pay for your college, university, or trade school tuition. You can use your own money or you can use other people's money. When it comes to your own money, you can pay it all out of pocket as the tuition bill comes due, or take out loans and pay it off over time. Now, you may think of loans as being other people's money, but in practice, they're really not, because unless they're forgiven, you'll be repaying them with your own earnings later down the road. Other people's money, in the truest sense of the phrase, does not need to ever be repaid, and it comes in the forms of grants and scholarships. In that category, there's also the educational money given to you by the military in the forms of the various GI Bills, and that is a bit of a gray area. While it's true that you don't ever have to pay it back, as it is other people's money, in this case the taxpayers, you are getting it for free in exchange for several years of committed military service. Okay, so let's go over all the various options you have, starting with loans and later moving on to grants, military money, and loan forgiveness. Loans come in two very distinct categories: federal loans and private loans. Federal loans make up about 92% of all educational loans taken out in the United States, so we'll cover them first. There are 43 million people currently holding a federal loan for a grand total of $1.6 trillion owed, so this is a very sizable chunk of debt. There are four major types of federal loans: direct subsidized, direct unsubsidized, direct plus, and consolidation loans. Now, all four come from the federal government, but they're all different in their requirements and benefits. Direct subsidized loans are needs-based, and the borrower must demonstrate financial need. These types of loans have lower borrowing limits, and they are also for undergraduate education only. The upside is that the government does pay interest on these loans, and you're only responsible for paying back the principal. With direct unsubsidized loans, borrowers do not need to show financial need, and thus a wider group of students can apply. These types of loans have a higher borrowing limit, and they can be used for graduate and professional studies, not just undergraduate. The downside is that you're responsible for both principal and interest when it's time to repay them. Now, direct subsidized and direct unsubsidized loans cover most types of borrowers, so what exactly is direct plus loans for? This third type of loan is actually meant to fill in the gaps in funding that are not covered by the first two types or any other financial aid. Finally, we have the fourth type of loan, and that's the direct consolidation loan. As the name implies, this loan is meant to consolidate other federal loans you may have taken out during the course of your education. When consolidated, numerous loan payments become just one, and is both easier and you can possibly save money on the interest. Okay, so these are the primary sources of federal education money. The next question is, how do you apply and get some of it for your own educational needs? Well, the gateway to all federal loans is the famous or infamous FAFSA form that many college-bound students get very familiar with. FAFSA is an acronym for Free Application for Federal Student Aid, and while it used to be a rather sizable paper application, these days it's filled out completely online. To start an application, you need to go to FAFSA.gov, which will actually then redirect you to studentaid.gov, a website run by the Department of Education. There's a lot of information on that website, so be sure to read everything through carefully before applying, and when you're ready, you will create what is called an FSA ID, and then gathering and submitting supporting documents for your application. If you have all the info ready, it actually doesn't take that long to complete this form, with most students able to fill it out and submit it in about an hour. Okay, so that was an overview overview of all the federal loans and how to apply for them. Let's now turn our attention to the private ones, which make up the remaining 8% of all the educational loans out there. Private loans are a bit more straightforward than the federal ones. These are, of course, higher education loans that are made by a bank, credit union, or a financing company that specializes in this. And a private loan is actually what I had when I went back to college myself. Private loans will always consider your credit and income, and a student with poor credit or no significant assets or income will need a parent as a cosigner. If, of course, the parents are in the same situation, then that implies that a private loan may not be the way to go. Private loans typically have interest rates on the higher side. They also cannot be discharged in bankruptcy and are rarely, if ever, forgiven. Because of these limitations, it's recommended that private loans are always a backup to the federal ones and not the primary source of funding. I personally ended up getting private loans because I went back to college later in life, and at that point I was already making too much to qualify for just about any federal loan or grant, but unfortunately I wasn't making enough to pay for the university I chose outright, so I had to take out some private loans. Okay, let's now turn our attention to grants. These can be federal or private, and as I mentioned earlier, they do not need to be repaid. Grants come in two broad categories: needs-based and merit-based, and they're not mutually exclusive, with a student possibly being eligible for both. Needs-based grants are for extremely low-income applicants who will probably not qualify for any loans and will not have the means to pay them back in the near future anyway. The best known of these grants is the federal Pell Grant. You do have to demonstrate exceptional financial need, and because of this bar, only certain applicants will qualify. The way to apply for grants is similar to loans. You need to fill out the FAFSA form. There are, of course, lots of other grants out there, with merit-based being the more well-known category. These are given out to students who have demonstrated exceptional academic or sports achievements and may often involve a full ride, which is just to say that 100% of their tuition is usually covered. In the case of NCAA or other sports, you of course have to participate in that sport, but that's a whole other topic unto itself. Many colleges and universities give out smaller grants to supplement the main source of funding, but usually these grants are fairly small in monetary value, and I do recall receiving a handful of $500 grants when I went back to college, and together they didn't cover a whole lot more than perhaps the tuition on one class, but of course it all helped. The source for this funding is usually the Alumni Association, but it can also be a corporate sponsor or directly from the university or college itself. Okay, let's now briefly discuss another source of educational funding, and that is the military. The well-known GI Bill and its several variations have been educating current and former service members for decades now. And if you plan to serve in the armed forces, it's a great way to get your education paid for. Now, this is a huge topic which can't really be covered fully in an introductory video, so I'll just hit some of the highlights. The modern GI Bill is called the post 9/11 GI Bill, and it was significantly rewritten and upgraded since the September 2001 terror attacks. Many service members fall under this bill or a variation of it called the Montgomery GI Bill. The Montgomery one covers both active duty and select reserve members, and this bill allows veterans to make lump sum contributions to close the gap between their time served and 100% eligibility if they haven't been in the service long enough. There's also the Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Program, or the VR&E, to train disabled vets. And finally, there's the Survivors and Dependent Educational Assistance Program, or the DEA, which is set up for spouses or children of disabled vets to enable them to get job training and education. There's a lot more to military educational aid, and if you're interested in specific details or additional info, start out by talking to a recruiter, former service members, or someone at the VA who specializes in these benefits. Finally, to finish up, let's talk about loan forgiveness and freezes. This has certainly been in the news a lot lately, as the Biden administration has made federal loan forgiveness a major policy goal. Now remember, none of this applies to private loans, as the government has no jurisdiction over those, so we're only talking about the federal ones that are issued by the Department of Education. There are three main categories of forgiveness that need to be discussed. First and best known is the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. This one has actually been around for a while and seeks to forgive educational loans taken out by government and non-for-profit workers after they made at least 10 years of qualifying payments. The program was expanded recently and has now canceled over $8.1 billion in federal student debt for over 145,000 eligible borrowers. Another major ongoing program is for defrauded borrowers. Took out federal loans to pay for what turned out to be fraudulent institutions institutions such as the Art Institute, ITT Tech, and Westwood College, among others. Thus far, the program has canceled over $6 billion in federal student debt for over 200,000 borrowers. Finally, there's a federal student loan pandemic-related freeze, which was effective since March of 2020, but is set to expire in August of 2022, in just a month. Now, it's important to mention that these aren't the only loan forgiveness or freeze programs out there, and you really need to do your own research as this information changes weekly. Reach out to the Department of Education to see if your loan is eligible for a forgiveness or at least a freeze. And keep an eye on the headlines, as this has been a developing story all throughout 2022. Alright, so this was a general overview of educational loans and grants. If you enjoyed this video and found it useful, please do consider subscribing to this channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future videos just like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.